All right, welcome back, everyone, to another HMC HealthWorks podcast. I'm Megan Stakowski, and joining me again is Abraham Jin. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Hey Megan, it's glad to be here.
So, last time we spoke about our larger topic, becoming a leader worth following, and how you really must know yourself to lead yourself. And today, we're going to take that awareness, that self awareness, a bit further and discuss deeper levels of influence. And I know you're going to share with us a great tool and a lot of great insight to help us explore this topic. And to kind of get us started, I want to introduce one thing that you'll talk more about is thinking about our actions on a dimmer switch, right? So that switch goes up and down. And when it goes up, we're being intentional with our actions. And when we go down, our actions are accidental. So can you expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, that dimmer switch, when it goes down, we say that we're living a life of accidental leadership tendencies. And in that, you just can imagine everything is dark. You're just kind of not being able to see your landscape. You're not able to see the roadmap of where you're going. And I would say it's another way to say that you're just going on autopilot, right? And that's kind of crazy. I know, like sometimes people do things on Tesla and go on autopilot, and you get, some you know bad crashes if you just kind of expect that it's going to pilot on its own without any type of intentionality. And people kind of live their life that way, right? If you live in autopilot, you're going to keep doing the same thing, and whatever trajectory you're going, if it's going in the wrong direction, you're going to basically crash. And then really, as you put that light up, you're being more intentional. You're able to see your landscape. You're able to have a clear path of the future. You're starting to see your tendencies and your patterns and be able to lead yourself into different action and be more intentional versus being reactionary or just not responsive to your landscape.
Right. So I love how you said, on a dimmer switch. So as we turn up the light, we're able to see a little bit more clearly. I think that provides a nice kind of visual for everyone. So kind of keeping with the same theme, right, from the last time we spoke, this self-awareness and being aware of our tendencies and our actions and how that really kind of plays out at home and at work. What is the tool that you're going to share with us to help us examine, how this influences, our lives?
Yeah, it's called the five circles of influence. And it's not like a rocket science tools. None of our leadership tools are like, oh my gosh, like it is so complex and so hard to understand. The sake of simplicity is so that we can all understand and we can all share and learn from it. And really, because it's simple, we can start to apply it into every area of our lives. But basically, you have two words, intentional and accidental. And then from there, you have almost like a target practice, kind of concentric circles that are coming and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in the inner circle, you'll see self, and then you have family, and then you have team, and then organization and community. And really, what we find is that there's an arrow that's coming from the self all the way out, pointing out to the community. And what we find is that intentionality needs to first start with yourself. It starts from the inside out. And we really believe that as you think about becoming a leader worth following, that's the overall theme that we're trying to become, right? Become a leader worth following. For that to actually happen, we need to first start with ourselves. We have seen so many leaders in our journey where they are awesome in the outside, but all their inner circles of relation, maybe with yourself or with their family, has gone into self implosion, that everything else falls apart. And so we believe that intentionality first starts with your inner circles so that you can have the infrastructure to continue to maintain and sustain the outer circles. And for a leader worth following to truly be someone that we want to look up to and become, we need to actually be consistent, congruent in every circle of our influence.
So how do we take that very simple and easy to understand tool that you just mentioned, and we start with ourselves, right? We've got that self-awareness, we're working on our tendencies and our consequences. How do we take it out to the next circle?
Yeah. You know, the reason why we say, hey, first start with yourself and then it kind of overflows into the outer circles is because I think for us to be intentional and starting to take ownership of our lives and to even see change, if we put the onus of change on ourselves, guess what? We're going to be able to feel more empowered and more ownership of that change. Sometimes it's hard to change other people, but we can change ourselves first. And in that, as you start to make those radical, practical, action oriented, intentional steps of change, then let's say, for example, hey, I've learned to not just push people, but I've learned to pull and listen to hear from people. If I do that for my family members, guess what? If you can listen and respond to your family members, guess what? You can respond to other people. Sometimes the hardest people to lead can be within your family. And we
Mm-hmm.
believe that the greatest giants can be slayed, not out in the world, but sometimes needs to be slayed inside your family. And if you can do that, guess what? You can take on anything out there.
I think that really does ring true. Especially because I don't want to say we get accidental with our families, but it's easy to. Especially over the past year, we've been inside. We've had the same core group of people we've been with for the whole past COVID experience, and it's been, I would say, kind of easy to kind of get. We all have our responsibilities and our tendencies, and it's, I'm sure, for a lot of leaders has been easy to get stuck in that and not be rising up to that intentional.
For sure. And I'll give you a frank, transparent conversation here. I mean, last night I had a conversation with my wife, and she said, "Honey, like you're doing these projects, and you're working on some things, and sometimes you bring it out into the family space, and you expect that I know that you're doing something, and you're not intentionally communicating that you have to work on it, but that you want to be with us at the same time." And so I get frustrated when you come out there thinking that it's all game, that I can talk to you and engage you, but you get frustrated when I talk to you that way. I don't know what you're doing. And I realized, oh my gosh, I've been accidental. I just kind of went autopilot, work mode, bringing it in. I wanted to be with family, but I wasn't being intentional in communicating with my wife. And so I imagine, if you think about that, how I was accidental in that I have a natural tendency to focus and kind of go into that work mode in a place where I don't over communicate with those around me. That could look like in the workspace, if I translate that over, is like, hey, that tendency can even overflow even to my team. If I'm not intentional, I could be siloed in my projects. I will not be over communicating to my stakeholder relationship. And naturally, I expect that if I just stick my head to the ground and I'm just doing my part, that everyone else will understand how to do their part. But the reality is, it doesn't happen that way. We have to over communicate. And imagine all of this amplified with the remote scenario that we're living in. That communication and being intentional and over communicating our intentions and the scope of work has to be emphasized in the time that we live in. And so that is something where I have realized, wow, I've been accidental in my family, where I need to be more intentional communication. I'm like, oh, and that also translates into in my team if I'm not careful. And so, but guess what? As I'm learning to elevate my communication, not siloing myself within my family members, guess what? It naturally ripples effect over into the other areas. But for some odd reason, you can be awesome in the outside, be over communicative on the outside,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes it never really trickles into your inner circles. It just doesn't happen that way. There is this weird phenomenon when we start from the inside, it does impact the outside, but the outside sometimes doesn't always translate into the inside.
Well, thank you so much for that example. I know it was personal and really appreciate you sharing it because it was really, really easy to relate to. And it just really made me think about something we talked about last time we spoke about how um, continuously knowing ourselves to lead ourselves makes us have to continuously learn and refocus and come back to all of these different tools we've talked about. So as our family grows, as we move, as we grow, as just people going through life, we do have to keep remembering to come back to that self circle, the family circle, and then have it ripple out. So thanks for that reminder.
Yeah. And I want to say, I think sometimes some people are very compartmentalized and they say, hey, what's out in the team and my work and my organization is very different from my family, myself, right? Like my self-care, my family, it's different. And they're like, no, actually, we know people who have, they've not led themselves. They've maybe gone into some areas of unhealthy habits. They have maybe health concerns because they just continue to not lead themselves. Maybe their family falls apart. Guess what? All those things impact what? Your work. and it affects the way that you do your work and the quality of your work. And so we say, hey, if you want to be a leader worth following, you have to be intentional all the way from the inside out. And it's hard. It's a journey, right? And when you try to be intentional in certain circles of your influence, guess what? So other areas become a little more accidental. And so we always kind of need to calibrate. And so it's a great tool just kind of look at your current landscape and just say, hey, where am I doing? Am I more accidental here? Am I more intentional here? Which circle do I need to be more intentional in at this moment so I can, take it to the next level? We're not going to be always be able to fully perfectly manage and be intentional in everything in our life, but there are certain seasons when we are able to say, you know what, we need to focus here. And so that's where hopefully you won't go on autopilot in the area that you really need to focus on. You will be able to be more intentional.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, striving to be perfectly set in each circle is really kind of unattainable. That would be a full-time job, right? To try to be, 100% intentional in every area. So yeah, kind of calibrating where your focus needs to be at that moment in your life is, I think, a perfect way to go about it. And before we wrap up, do you have an example for us about what it would look like to be intentional in perhaps an outer circle, say an organization or a team, and then less intentional in the inner circle?
Yeah, when we work with executive leadership, we often find that, they may be awesome in the community. They're giving money to the community. They're maybe volunteering. They're having these awesome speech. They might be doing things that are really in developing the community. However, maybe within their organization and team, they could be totally dominating. They could be jerks. They could be, driving for performance and really pushing it. And they're seeing a lot of collateral damage of people being burnt out and disengaged. And so what we find is that there's a huge disharmony in regards to how you function and be intentional and being a liberating presence in the community or a leader worth following, but in the organization, you're just being totally accidental, right? And so it's just so important as leaders that we need to start to audit and see, hey, where are our tendencies? Where are we really focused on naturally and where are we not? And in the areas that we're accidental, we need to then calibrate and start to make the right adjustments so that we can be a leader worth following in every circle of our influence.
Well, thank you again so much for your time. Just like last time, you gave me a lot to think about, and I appreciate your insight, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Well, thank you, Megan. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, and stay tuned for more HMC HealthWorks podcasts.